Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the latest in the series of UKCCF podcasts. I'm joined today by my co-host, the infamous Chris D'Souza from CGI. Welcome, Chris.
I think there's a distinction there, isn't it? Infamous versus famous person. But I'm tremendously excited by today because it's a topic which I'm really interested in. I think a load of our audience are certainly trying to get their heads around, Trevor. So, yeah, looking forward to this afternoon.
Absolutely. And our guest today is Dan O'Connell. He's the Chief AI and Strategy Officer at Dialpad. Dan, welcome.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. And
have we gone international? Do I hear a twang in your voice there? Have we?
You have. You're constantly expanding reach.
We've got across the pond.
although, as I shared, I'm a Brit at heart.
So let's get on with the first question. That'll be from myself. So Dan, I'm finding from all the meetings I'm running that AI is the talk of the contact center industry at the moment, not only in the UK but all over the world. What is your AI technology? Is it the same as ChatGPT?
Yeah, so for a little bit of and then I'll give a little bit of context just and background on myself for one moment and talk about Dialpad, and then I can get into how we think about AI and our technology. I was fortunate to join Dialpad 5 years ago. They acquired my speech recognition and NLP startup called Talk-IQ. So for those of the people out there that leverage technologies like Siri or Alexa, same technology in terms of speech recognition, and how do we apply that in the contact center and the unified communication space? And when we think about AI, it's really about, look, we power communications on any device anywhere in the world, whether that's on voice, video, or meetings. And then there becomes this massive opportunity to leverage speech recognition to go transcribe conversations in the moment. And then you can start to use, whether it's large language models like ChatGPT or Google Vertex, or even build your own in-house NLP models, to start to categorize that data. And if you can start to categorize the data, you can then start to focus on building features that provide assistance. What I mean by that is providing suggested answers to questions. You can start to provide features that do automation, and also features that can start to gather insights from conversations. So can start to measure things like customer satisfaction or purchase intent.
Okay, excellent.
So at the moment, everyone's talking about the future of AI, and the people are starting to paint it into a little bit of a picture of something that's going to. Because I think if you go back maybe 4 or 5 years, AI was going to destroy and end the contact center industry. Now apparently AI is going to end humanity. If you listen to some folk. But I suppose it's all down to the data that goes into it and the data that you train, or that the model is trained upon. How do you ensure that the data that goes into the platform or into your AI model is of quality, useful, therefore, to the end user? And also, I suppose, and the key thing that people are saying to me is unbiased as well.
Yeah, so I think when you get into, and I think there's a couple things, there's a couple different strategies that different businesses can go about and leverage. For us, as I shared, we focus on doing a lot of our own models in-house. And so that means that you've got to go and build a team of experts. It also means that you have to have access to data to go and build these models. And there's different approaches to how do you get data. One is you can go and purchase data, and that might be qualified, that might be high quality data. But when you go and purchase data, I think like one of the challenges that shows up for businesses that are building AI applications is you don't necessarily know all of the biases that you shared there, Chris, is what actually went into that data set. Does it have representative qualities, right? Is it focused on just large businesses? How does it Is it made up of different genders and different diversities, different cultures? All of these things start to play into account. So for us, we like to build our own models in-house. We like to go and partner with our customers. We ask our partners and customers and engage with them and say, look, here's what we're working on. Let's take, for example, like a customer satisfaction model. We'll go and engage businesses across SMB, mid-market, enterprise. We'll ask them if they're willing to share their data with us. If they say yes, we then go and make sure that we strip all of the personal identifiable information from that data that might pop up. We completely anonymize the data. And then we make sure our data scientists make sure that it's representative. And we try to do as good of a job as possible of removing bias. And that's a way that you can get into and say, look, are we making sure that we're inclusive as I said, different ethnicities, different genders, different size of businesses, right? Different types of conversations that come up. But again, our approach is you got to be aware of the biases that show up. You want to make sure that you've got a representative data set that's there and take the necessary precautions and try and be as objective as possible.
I suppose then, if I think back, there's two things that sort of that pop into my mind with that. I think back to being at one of the contact center expos, and this was around, I'd say, 4 or 5 years, actually probably after 2015. Yeah. And again, that statement, contact centers will dramatically change. And they didn't forecast COVID, but they forecast by 2020, I think the stat was 80% of contact center staff would have been replaced by a robot. I think that's what they were calling it at the time, rather than AI. And I remember popping into my mind at that point, thinking to myself, well, who then takes responsibility for that output, right? So, for example, I've called the contact center to buy a financial services product, as an example, and there's regulation there. There's things that have got to be done correctly. And if the robot doesn't do it right, and I know that, it's all down to how you design it and build it, etc. But there's always, because it's not fixed answers, isn't it? It's almost letting the model loose and I'll put the inverted commas around it, think for itself.
Yep.
Of course, humans get it wrong all the time, don't they? We know that. That's why we have quality assessors. But it's dealing with that, surely, that also becomes a massive issue for businesses and a fear, I would suppose.
Yep. And I think like one of the questions, something I'd encourage people to ask about, which is, if you're purchasing software, asking them, hey, how do you build your models? And then what is it focused on, right? So for example, you gave a great example of if you're a financial services business, you want to make sure that if you're purchasing software, you want to make sure that, hey, that data set is probably for your use case in financial services and it is built on other conversations that are around financial services. I always give this example of customer satisfaction. And so we have a feature that we have built. It naturally infers customer satisfaction from any conversation in real time. What we do there is we build different models for customer satisfaction for specific industries and verticals. And the reason for that is because a financial services support conversation is very different sounding than somebody that's talking about getting support and help in healthcare, and it's very different than somebody that's getting help and calling into, say, an e-commerce business. And so we think that, look, if you're looking for the best accuracy and the best output in terms of the models, you want to make sure that they're not only built for specific use cases, but they're also built for specific businesses and specific industries. Like that's how you get a really high quality, really thoughtful model out there in the wild.
Okay, interesting.
So I think that brings me on to, so what kind of accuracy and performance metrics can we expect from your AI technology?
Yeah, and when we talk, accuracy is always one of these things that I think is always top of mind for people. And as much as everybody wants to say, look, you have a model that's 100% accurate, I think that's not true. I always remind people, look, as humans, we make mistakes. We naturally infer things ourselves that may or may not be true at times. But when we go and design models, we want them, one, to be directionally accurate. And what I mean by that is we set typical baseline bars in terms of accuracy or precision of north of 80%. And so what I mean is no model is going to be perfect. But we think if we can achieve that bar of getting 80% or higher accuracy, that's going to add real value to our business. It's going to be right far more often than it's going to be wrong. But I think any business that's out there that says, look, we have a model that is near perfection or 100% accurate, is as I said, it's almost an impossible task to go and achieve.
Because one of the things that again occurs to me, and I'm in a really fortunate position, Dan, that I get to go and meet with lots of peers within the industry, and we chat. Yeah. As exciting as it sounds, we chat about the trends within the contact center world, and I'm fortunate enough to have been there, bought the t-shirt and started off where you came to work with a couple of baked bean cans and a bit of string, and that was our contact center, all those years ago. There's more technology, things like particularly your automation, your conversational AI, chat GPT as well, whatever we choose to call it. There's more of that stuff in our industry than there ever has been before. We've become a technology-driven industry.
Yeah.
Why do you think businesses are not leaping to implement these things, and B, why do you think customer experience isn't heading in the same direction? Because particularly if we look at the UK market, it's fair to say that there's a lot of people who are very dissatisfied with the experience that they're getting when they contact businesses that they interact with. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think one is there's probably a little bit of analysis paralysis at this moment in time, which I think is the pace of innovation when we talk about AI-related technologies, whether that can be speech recognition, semantic search, natural language processing, large language models, whatever you want to kind of label and throw at it. One is I think there's so much innovation and movement going on that some businesses just don't know where to start. And they're like, hey, I have got so many different problems that I can go and that I want to go and solve. Which one at the top of the list? So I think there's a little bit of analysis paralysis for businesses in terms of where do I start? Two is, do they understand the technologies, right? Do they have an in-house team that can help implement it? Do they need to go and partner with somebody on those pieces? So I think those are trends that I think are very real out there in the market. I usually push businesses and tell them, look, you have to embrace this. It can open up a plethora of opportunities. It can solve very real problems for you. And it's not difficult to get started. You don't need to have an in-house team. And then I think the other part for the customers is, businesses want to implement things that actually work. And I think the worst thing you want to do is go buy a piece of software, spend a bunch of time, or if it's easy to deploy, not a lot of time, you get it in front of the customers and then it doesn't work. And then your customers are perhaps even more frustrated and pissed off than they were in the past. But again, for me, I'm an optimist when I think about these technologies. I've been immersed in AI for almost a decade at this point, which doesn't sound like a long time, but there's been just a profound amount of innovation over that decade. Then I'm a big believer that, look, these applications are real. You can implement them today. They can solve problems for you. They can add value to the customer. And I truly believe that they can provide a better customer experience for the people that are engaging with your brand.
Okay. So following on from that, you've gone through the procurement process. So you've decided what AI platform you're going to use. You've got it into the business. It's there ready to go. Obviously, the next question is, what kind of support and training is needed to effectively use your AI technology? Because you want to get your return on your investment and maximize how it works. So any hints and tips there?
Yeah, so I think, for us at Dialpad, and I like to be a little bit self-serving on talking about things. For us, I think what's important is, look, you can go buy our software, you can implement it, and it works out of the box. And when I engage with our AI team, our product and engineering teams, I really speak about this ad nauseum with them, which is people be able to have customization on top of it, because every business in the world is going to want to make tweaks. They're going to want to make sure it works for their specific use case, however nuanced it is. We talk about, we've got a feature that we're launching next month that does essentially what we call live playbook tracking. You could think of it like live script adherence. So a business can load a script in the contact center and we'll make sure that agents are following that script. We have templates out of the box that somebody that goes and purchases Dialpad can go and say, hey, let me use one of the templates that are there. We can put that in place to go and track the quality assurance in the process. But we also say, hey, if one of those templates doesn't work, you can go and build your own template and load it into the system and make sure that you have that customization. So I think those are the things when you think about implementation is people want to have easy deployment. They want to have things that work out of the box for them. They want to have the ability to have customization. And then on top of it is, many businesses may add professional services on top of that to say, hey, can I go get some help in terms of deployment or support or whatever might happen on that front?
Okay.
Before I get to my next question, I think it's fair to say that also someone once said to me actually that it's very important. You almost have to think about your AI model as another employee, that you wouldn't just employ someone and then leave them to it for the rest of their career. Yeah, you've got to look after it and nurture it and work with it.
And I think to your point, just buying software, these are all of the types of questions that I usually try to encourage buyers to think about, right? It's because it's not just, hey, does this software going to solve the problem that I have? It is, how easy is it to deploy and get set up? Right? You might have the expectation that it takes 2 weeks and perhaps you buy a piece of software and it takes 6 months. Well, that's going to have a very real implication for your business. 2 is understand, can I customize it? Right? So if something doesn't work, do I have the ability to go and fine tune something or customize it? And then the last part is support look like, right? What does my professional services look like? And sometimes I think we get so excited about solving a problem and finding a piece of software and buying the vision that you kind of quickly move past all of this. Hey, well, once it's there, what happens and what does my support resources actually look like in management of the software?
Interesting. And of course, what we all get very excited about, and quite rightly so actually, is data security, privacy, the data that these artificial intelligent entities, and I'm being deliberately provocative there,
Sure.
are collecting on behalf of businesses. We see that almost on a weekly basis, large organizations have suffered some kind of data hack. And I remember again looking at how in the early days of websites where you could do SQL injections into the search bar on a website to gain access. Yeah. It was because it was new technology, people didn't understand the minds of the hackers, so to speak. Yeah. How this technology being set up and protecting user data, customer data, and also protecting the overall security infrastructure of businesses that take on this technology?
Yeah, so I think privacy and security and compliance needs to be number one, right? At Dialpad, we think about that, as I said, each and every day when we engage with our customers, making sure that their data is encrypted, that it's stripped of personal identifiable information, right? That it's compliant, whether that's in the GDPR or whether it's under US regulation, HIPAA compliance, all of that, SOC compliance, the different compliance, as I said, the different regulations that are out there. My recommendation again for buyers that are looking at different pieces of software and are like, hey, are perhaps just starting their AI journey is really, Chris, you nailed it, is asking these questions, which is, what does data residency look like? Where's my data stored? How is it stored? Is it encrypted? Is it not? Is it stripped of personal identifiable information? Is it anonymized? What are data retention policies look like? Even asking questions to those business to say, hey, is my data used to build a model? Is that model used only to enhance, me as the buyer and my software? Or is it used more broadly? And so these are all new, as I said, as we kind of get into the golden age of AI, I think these are all the types of questions that I really encourage, buyers of business of different pieces of software to start to think about, right? And understanding all of the intricacies that comes up. And then, where we started is that obviously when you're talking about data, it gets into hey, is this built for me, right? Is it built for my use case, right? Is there bias in the data? And I think even something, I know this is a little bit of a ramble, I always encourage our team when we talk about bias in data is if there is a bias in a model that you've made, just to explain it. as I said, it's difficult to build a model that is going to be completely removed of any bias. And so, as I said, being intentional about the models that you're building and where biases may or may not show up.
But where does the legal place then sit? Sorry, so say for example the bot, because there was it the Google one or the Microsoft one a few years ago went off and trained itself on Twitter, and after a few hours it had become very problematic, shall we say, as far as being politically correct.
Well, yeah, well, one of the things that pops up, and I think this is always interesting, right? Because if you're building an AI startup, and I'm not speaking about Dialpad, I'm trying to speak in some product generalities. One of the things that pops up is you're like, hey, well, I need access to a bunch of data to go build a model. Well, fortunately or unfortunately, one of the greatest places of just data out there on the internet is Twitter and also Reddit. And so, as I said, now, depending on the subreddit you're in, depending on the people you're following on Twitter, there are going to be some major biases that show up in that. And again, sometimes I think what happens for startups is they want to move really quickly. They want to get something out there in production. And so they may not be taking into account, all of the intricacies around the data set that they are building or leveraging to go and build a model on those pieces.
Okay. I suppose it's taking the same precautions as you would with any software deployment.
Yeah.
Yeah. You talked earlier on briefly around customization. Can you explain a bit about how your technology is customized to meet specific business needs? Be more specific on that side.
Yeah. So I'll give two examples. So one thing gets into speech recognition. So as I said, we put, Dialpad as a customer intelligence platform. We power communications on any device. And then I spoke about, hey, we build our own speech recognition, which allows us to do real-time transcription of conversations. So one of the things that we do is we actually build a specific language model for every business that we work with. And when I talk about that, why that matters is every business in the world is going to have words that are important to them that don't show up in the Merriam-Webster dictionary. Those might be acronyms. They might be product names that are spelled uniquely. It might be competitor names, you name it. And so we allow a business to go in there and actually build their own speech recognition model or add words that are important to them so we can accurately transcribe them. And if we can actually start to transcribe them, well, then we can start to provide them with analysis and categorization to say, here's how often your new product is being spoken about. And here's what the sentiment looks like around that product, right? Whether it's being responded to positively or negatively. The other example is, and I alluded to this, is around customer satisfaction or inferring CSAT from conversations, which is making sure that you have the ability to say, hey, this is the model that we're using for this industry, whether you're in healthcare or financial services. As I said, we built models that are specific to specific industries, but also allowing us to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to say, hey, when we give you what we think the customer satisfaction is from the conversation, wrong. And if it's wrong and not accurate, we will then go and take that labeled data, because you as the user are helping label the data. We will then go and make adjustments to the model that is being used for you, and we'll basically start to fine tune it with your input. And so these are just two examples of how we think about customization and providing utility to the business to say, hey, you have the ability to go and tweak the model, make sure that again, we can identify words that might be important to you that we don't know about. You can do that in pretty much real time. And then other times when you're interacting with features is using your input for us to go and take that labeled data to then go fine tune a model.
Okay, great, thank you.
So, as I mentioned at the start, our lovely Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is putting ourselves forward as the regulatory lead for AI globally. And I don't think, regulating AI, it sounds like something from, almost a bit fanciful really at the moment. But from your perspective, and I know this is probably a very difficult question because obviously we expand this perhaps a little bit outside of just purely the contact center world. Yeah. Well, how do you think I mean, firstly, do you believe the hype that the media are putting out there that the damage that AI could cause? Because I personally don't really. However, and what do you? How do you think AI, that this new age, I think you called it the new age of AI earlier, how do you think that needs to be regulated? What checks and balances would you like to see?
Yeah. So I think I probably align with you, Chris, which is as much as I view myself as an optimist and a technologist, I don't believe that in kind of the doomsday scenario, I think there are so many steps that would have to take in order for that to play out. I think it makes good marketing fodder and good headlines for people that want to read that stuff. To be honest, it's perhaps more anyway on those pieces. That said, I do think regulation is important. And I'm a believer in regulation. And I'll say this carefully in terms of making sure that it doesn't stifle innovation, though, because I do think that there are so many benefits from AI powered and related technologies that can solve very real problems for us as kind of a human species. But I think that upside, I would like to get to faster than later, than for it to take longer. I think what's important about regulation too is making sure that it's, there's a collective body that is doing it, whether that's, I would like to see a global collaboration across different countries. So I don't think it should be just one government or one business that is defining what regulation looks like. But I think regulation is important, making sure we all understand what are the potential opportunities and also challenges and risks is a good thing. But making sure that that doesn't stifle innovation and making sure that we're not making those decisions just through one governing body, and making sure if there is one governing body that is representative of multiple people, countries, companies, you name it.
Okay, good. Okay, so how do you address issues of bias or discrimination in AI models, and what steps do you take to mitigate these issues?
Yeah, so so great question. And I alluded to a few of these things, which is one is making sure, fortunately for us at Dialpad, we build a lot of our own models. So we take into account, hey, who are we building for? What does the data set look like? As you're building models, I think it's good to do checks and balances. And again, some of this stuff, it's not meant to sound like rocket science, but it is, hey, if you're building a model and your model is being designed for the enterprise, well, then it's always good to go and check to say, what does it look like for small businesses that might end up buying that software? Does it work for them? So I know a lot of times when we think about bias in models, we might think about identity and gender and race and all of those pieces, but there's also a bias to what is the size of business that we're building the model for, right? Because an enterprise financial services conversation is going to sound very different than a business and financial services for a small business that might be just a 1 or 2 person shop on that. So these are all things that we try to do a lot of testing and a lot of rigor, and then and again, taking the necessary precautions when you think about building the data set and the acquisition of that data that would be used for it.
Okay. So a lot of people I talk to in the industry realize and recognize that at some stage their business is going to implement AI. It, in all likelihood, needs AI. Yeah. But I think they struggle with the use case. So as I'm sure you're aware, the UK particularly, we're suffering from extreme contact center agent attrition. So yeah, I kind of figured that what people are going is, we're losing staff, we can't get staff, let's put some AI in. And that's as deep as the thinking goes, or, at a certain level. So from your point of view, from your thinking, particularly where you sit, in your role, what do you think the biggest opportunities that there are for AI, particularly in communication, collaboration, but obviously overall contact center space?
Yeah, the very biggest, and the reason, as I said, I'm still here at Dialpad 5 years after they acquired our startup, and I still believe this is the case. I think the biggest opportunity in contact centers today is to be able to go and analyze and capture conversations in real time. And if you can do that in real time, you can then go and solve three things. You can instantly categorize every conversation that is happening, and businesses spend an immense amount of time and human capital to say, you know, who called in most often to my contact center? What did they call about? And that data today is always inaccurate. It's relying on humans to go and label it. It's inconsistent. We forget to do it, you name it. So I think there's a massive opportunity to go and instantly categorize information, and large language models like ChatGPT and Google Vertex are exceptionally good at being able to do that out of the box without any fine tuning. Two is the ability to go and empower automations. To your point, Chris, these large language models, I think why people get really excited around ChatGPT and Google Vertex is because of the quality of the conversations that they can now have through a chatbot, that it sounds, sounds human, but what we mean by that is it sounds fluid and it sounds intelligent. And so I think there are some really wonderful, awesome experiences that people can have with basically a next generation chatbot powering automations. And then the last part is enhancing the agent experience. And what I mean by that is powering assistance to them, whether that's giving information to the agent that might be important to have in that moment in time. Maybe it's a suggested answer to a question. It might be a recommended next best action. It might be a past contextual information to say, oh, Chris called in 2 weeks ago. He was very frustrated about asking for a refund. That issue hasn't been resolved. And so, again, I think there are some immense opportunities to provide contextually relevant information to people when they need it in the moment they need it.
Mm.
But the biggest thing to me all stems from, can I go and capture and analyze conversations in real time? And I think that is still today a massive opportunity that's out there. And again, you can get into, people don't like call recordings or people don't want to be transcribed, but I think all of those concerns get mitigated and changed over the next 5 years because there are so many opportunities that these large language models can go and truly solve.
Okay, I mean, are you seeing any specific users leveraging AI for any particular reason? Anything specific that they are bringing it into the business for?
Yeah, I think in contact center today, one of the biggest opportunities I think at the forefront for many businesses that engage with us stems around quality assurance and call coaching. The ability to go and say, hey, let's go help automate that coaching and that quality assurance process. The second piece gets into, typically contact center agents have processes that they need to go and follow. And again, how do we go arm those agents with the necessary processes as they're engaging in calls to say, here are the 6 things that you need to ask about, and we can go and do that. And then the last part is, as I said, we announced a feature a couple quarters ago that inferred customer satisfaction. We know that every single business that uses a contact center today measures customer satisfaction. It's one of those metrics that everyone asks about. And today we send out surveys and we send out SMS texts to say, hey, Chris or Trevor, rate your experience 1 to 5. And you probably only respond if you're incredibly pissed off or you're really happy. And so this is a way that you can go and, I say, democratize that data to say, well, now we can measure it on every interaction that's coming in. So you get way more data. It's way more representative of the conversations that are happening. And by the way, you don't need to pay for additional software and you don't need to wait on responses to come in. It's just something that naturally occurs through the conversations. And so I think those are the perfect types of AI-powered features that are out there today that I think businesses come to us to get and see value from and want to engage with us on.
Amazing. So I suppose this will be a bit of a summary of some of the stuff that you've said already. So businesses, they want to go and evaluate an AI solution. Where do they start? Where should they start?
Yeah. For me, as I said, I think that the biggest opportunity stems from quality assurance coaching. And again, I think that's one of the biggest things Chris, you spoke about, you've got high turnover in staff and understanding, hey, every time you onboard somebody new, they've got to learn the ropes, and you've got to then spend your own time coaching them. And so I think a lot of businesses come to us and view coaching and quality assurance as a massive opportunity to help leverage AI to go and help them do that job better, right, or more efficient.
Okay, fantastic.
Lovely. Well, I think that very nicely brings the session to an end. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I've learned so much today about AI, what it can and can't do, and how it should be implemented. So I think it just remains for me to say thank you to my co-host Chris for joining me today and posing these questions. But above all, to Dan O'Connell from Dialpad, thank you so much for your time. And thank you for joining us and the insight you've given us to the world of AI. And we look forward to having a chat with you, hopefully very, very soon.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Chris and Trevor. It was great.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you very much. Bye for now. Bye-bye.
Yeah.